The afternoon sun filtered weakly through the dusty curtains of a cramped kitchen. The room was filled with the stale scent of overboiled vegetables, and on the chipped counter stood a single porcelain cup, the last remnant of what had once been a full set, passed down from the grandmother who had long since faded from memory. That cup was not just fragile. It was the only thing in the house that carried a sense of dignity. Little Clara, no more than 7, stood on her toes to reach it. Her small fingers trembled as she lifted it carefully from the counter, her wide eyes focused on not dropping it. But fate can be cruel to the innocent. A slip, a gasp, and the cup shattered against the hard tile floor. The sound was sharp, like glass cutting through silence. For a moment, there was only stillness. Then, the silence broke with a scream. "You stupid child," her mother roared, storming across the kitchen. The sound of her slippers slapping against the floor was as terrifying to Clara as thunder. Clara's eyes widened, tears brimming before she could even react. I didn't mean to," she stammered, her little hands lifted defensively. But her words never had the chance to settle. The woman's hand tangled in her daughter's hair, yanking hard enough to pull Clara off her feet. The child's scream pierced the air as her mother dragged her across the floor, shards of porcelain crunching beneath their steps. "You useless girl," the mother spat, her face twisted with rage, her voice echoing through the thin walls. "Do you know how much that cup meant? You ruin everything you touch." The neighbors heard. They always did. From open windows and back porches, whispers rose. Some shook their heads in pity, others in judgment. But none moved to intervene. It wasn't their business, they told themselves. Clara clawed at her mother's wrist, her small voice breaking. "Please, Mama, I'm sorry. I'll be good. I'll never break anything again." The woman's grip only tightened. "You're sorry? Sorry doesn't bring back the cup, does it?" She pulled the girl again, strands of fine brown hair tearing from Clara's scalp. The child's bare feet scraped the floor, her legs flailing. Her cries echoed outside the house now, carried into the street like a plea for help that no one answered. But then, there was another sound. A low, steady rumble of an engine, tires crunching against gravel. A sleek black car slowed to a stop at the gate. Its polished surface caught the sunlight, gleaming like something out of a different world, a world far removed from this broken home. Clara's mother froze for just a second, her hand still twisted in her daughter's hair. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breaths as she glanced toward the window. The car door opened with a deliberate click. Out stepped a tall man in a dark suit, his shoulders broad, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of the brim of his hat. His polished shoes tapped against the ground as he walked toward the gate. Neighbors leaned further out their windows, murmuring. Who was he? What business did someone like him have here? Clara, still trembling on the floor, blinked up through her tears. She had never seen anyone like him before, clean, powerful, commanding. He didn't belong to this street of peeling paint and broken fences. The man stopped at the threshold of the yard, his voice cutting through the air, low, but unmistakably firm. Enough. The word wasn't shouted, but it carried weight, heavy enough to silence the woman mid-motion. Clara's mother straightened, her face flushing with sudden shame and defiance. Her grip loosened just slightly, enough for Clara to crawl backward, clutching her scalp and sobbing quietly. The stranger's eyes fixed on the scene, on the child with hair disheveled and cheeks streaked with tears, and the woman with her hand still raised in anger. His gaze was piercing, like he had walked into dozens of rooms like this before, and knew exactly what kind of cruelty he was staring at. "Who are you?" the mother snapped, her embarrassment quickly hardening into hostility. She squared her shoulders, though her hand trembled. "Who are you to tell me how to raise my daughter?" The neighbors held their breath. No one dared speak. The man stepped closer, his hand brushing the iron gate, his voice calm but edged like steel. "Someone who cannot watch this continue." For a moment, no one moved. Clara's sobs softened to hiccups, her wide eyes locked on the stranger as though he were a figure out of a storybook. Her mother's lips curled into a sneer. "Mind your own business. This is my child, and I'll do with her as I see fit. People like you, men with fancy cars and too much money, think you can walk in and tell me how to live? Get off my property before I call the police." The man's jaw tightened, but his voice didn't waver. He looked not at the mother, but at Clara, his expression softening as his gaze fell upon her trembling form. Clara held his eyes, as if waiting for a miracle she didn't dare believe in. The neighbors leaned in closer. They could feel the moment stretching, teetering on the edge of something about to break. And then, just as the air thickened with tension, the stranger spoke again, his words landing like a hammer against stone. The street had fallen silent. Even the breeze seemed to hesitate, carrying only the echo of the mother's accusation. Neighbors lingered at windows, children pulled back by cautious hands, as if the entire block held its breath to witness the standoff. The stranger did not flinch at her words. His tall frame remained steady, his dark eyes locked on her as though weighing every ounce of venom in her voice. His silence stretched, unsettling. Then, slowly, he pushed open the gate. The metallic creak rang like a warning bell. Clara's mother stiffened. "I told you. This is my home. You're trespassing." The man stepped inside anyway, the sunlight glinting off his watch. His presence filled the small yard, commanding attention without effort. He didn't raise his voice, yet when he spoke, the words pressed down on everyone within earshot. "I saw you dragging her," he said evenly, "by her hair, like she was less than human. That is not discipline. That is cruelty." Clara's mother bristled, the heat rising in her face. "And who are you to decide what's cruel? You don't know us. You don't know me." His gaze flickered briefly to Clara, who had curled into a ball near the porch steps, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her eyes, still wet with tears, followed him with a fragile hope she could not voice. The man crouched slightly, lowering his height so he no longer towered above her. His tone softened, though it carried a firmness beneath it. "What is your name, child?" Clara sniffled, hesitated, then whispered, "Clara." He gave a faint nod as though memorizing the sound of her name. "Clara, do you want me to leave?" Clara's lips trembled. She looked at her mother, then back at him, caught between terror and longing. She couldn't speak, but her silence said more than words. Her mother stepped forward, fury sparking in her eyes. "Don't you dare fill her head with nonsense. She's my daughter, mine. You can't take that away." The man rose back to his full height. His shadow stretched long across the cracked yard, touching Clara as if shielding her. "I'm not here to take anything," he said, "but I will not stand aside while a child suffers, not today." The mother's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Stand aside? You think you're some kind of savior? Let me tell you something, stranger. Men like you come and go with your pity and your wallets, but when the money runs out, you'll be gone. And who will be stuck here with her?" "Me," she jabbed a finger at her chest, her voice shrill. "Always me," the neighbors murmured. Some nodded, recognizing truth twisted into weapon. Others shook their heads, unable to look at Clara's frightened form. The man's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with something deeper, recognition perhaps. His voice dropped lower, each word deliberate. "Children remember. They remember the hand that hurts them and the hand that saves them. Long after the shouting is gone, they remember. You think this is strength, but it's nothing but weakness dressed as rage." Clara's mother's face flushed crimson. She took a step closer, her voice trembling with both fury and fear. "Get out, leave us, before I make you regret ever stepping foot here." The man didn't move. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a slim leather wallet. For a moment the neighbors leaned in, expecting money, but instead he held up a small, worn photograph, creased at the edges, faded by time. He glanced down at it, then back at Clara, his voice soft but unyielding. "Once I knew a little girl who cried like that. I swore I'd never hear it again without doing something." Clara blinked, her small fingers clutching the wood of the porch steps. Her mother scoffed, folding her arms tightly. "You're nothing but a fool, chasing ghosts." But before another word could be spoken, Clara's voice broke the tension, thin, trembling, yet cutting through the yard like a blade. "Please, don't go." The neighbors gasped. It was the first time Clara had spoken aloud against her mother in public, her plea hanging fragile in the air. The man turned his head slowly, meeting her gaze. His expression softened, the edges of his stern demeanor melting just slightly. "I won't," he said. "Not until this ends." The mother's mouth opened, but no words came. She stared at her daughter, stunned into silence by the betrayal in her child's tone, and then, like thunder rolling in the distance, the man's phone rang, sharp and insistent in the tense quiet. He pulled it out, pressed it to his ear, and listened, his jaw clenched. When he lowered the phone, His eyes locked on Clara's mother, colder now, resolute. Child welfare is on their way. The words hung in the air like a sentence delivered. Child welfare is on their way. The neighbors whispered louder now, some with approval, others with apprehension. For years they had watched the woman's cruelty, but no one had dared to call the authorities. Now someone had, and he was no ordinary passerby. Clara's mother's face flushed red, her chest heaving as she spat the words again. "You'll regret this." She stormed back into the house, slamming the flimsy wooden door behind her. The walls shook, the window panes rattled, and then silence. Only Clara's quiet sobs filled the yard. The man remained still, his eyes following the door. He didn't move toward it, nor did he leave. Instead, he bent down again, crouching before Clara. "Does she always treat you this way?" he asked softly. Clara hesitated, glancing toward the door as though afraid her mother could hear her through the walls. She swallowed hard, then gave the faintest nod. Since I was little. Since Daddy left." Her words trembled, but the honesty in them struck like lightning. The man's jaw tightened. "And no one has helped you?" She shook her head. "They all say it's not their business." The neighbors, still lurking at their windows, dropped their eyes. The guilt was heavy, but none dared speak. The man exhaled slowly, his gaze sweeping across the street. Then he turned back to Clara. "It is someone's business. It's mine now." A sudden bang from inside the house made Clara flinch. The sound of drawers slamming, a voice muttering curses, then the mother's figure reappeared at the door. She held a half-smoked cigarette between her fingers, her eyes bloodshot, her face twisted with resentment. "You think you're clever," she hissed at the man, "calling people who don't know a thing about me. You think I like this life? You think I asked for a husband who left me with nothing but debt? You think I wanted to work myself to the bone while this girl breaks the only thing worth keeping?" Her voice cracked. For the first time, the neighbors saw something flicker beneath the rage. Desperation. The man straightened, his tone steady. "I don't judge your suffering, but I will not accept her suffering because of it. Poverty doesn't excuse cruelty." The mother laughed bitterly, a hollow, harsh sound. "Easy for you to say. Look at you, shoes polished, car gleaming, watch worth more than my house. You don't know what it's like to choose between feeding your child or paying rent. You don't know the shame of asking for credit at the store, of hearing whispers behind your back. Do you?" The neighbors stirred uncomfortably. Some nodded, some frowned. Her bitterness was sharp, but not without truth. The man's eyes darkened, his voice low. "You're wrong. I know it too well," the mother sneered. "Then why aren't you in the gutter with us?" He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to Clara again, his gaze softening. "Where does it hurt?" Clara lifted her hand slowly to her scalp, where her hair had been yanked, then to her arm, where faint bruises lay beneath her sleeve. The man's expression hardened. The mother threw her cigarette to the ground, crushing it beneath her heel. "Don't you dare make me out to be a monster. I've kept her alive this long, haven't I? Without me, she wouldn't even be here." Her words rang sharp, but Clara's sudden whisper cut through them like a knife. "Sometimes I wish I wasn't." The yard went deathly still. The neighbors gasped, one woman covering her mouth. The mother's face drained of color. Clara's small shoulders shook as she buried her face into her knees, her voice breaking. "I'm always bad. I always ruin everything. Mama says I'm the reason Daddy left." The man knelt beside her, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. His voice was firm but kind. "No, Clara, none of this is your fault. Do you hear me? None of it." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded slightly, clinging to the faint lifeline his words offered. The mother's hands trembled as she stepped forward, her voice shrill. "Stop. Filling her head with lies. She's mine. Mine. You think because you have money you can just walk in here and take her away?" The man stood slowly, his presence towering once more. His tone carried an authority that silenced the murmurs around them. "If protecting her means taking her away, then yes, I will." A sharp knock interrupted the tense standoff. The gate creaked as two figures in plain clothes stepped forward, child welfare officers, clipboards in hand, expressions grave. The mother's face blanched. She turned in panic, her eyes darting between the man, her daughter, and the officers. And then, in a voice cracking with both fury and fear, she spat the words that made everyone freeze. "If you want her so badly, then take her." Clara stumbled into the man's arms, her small body trembling as she clutched at the lapel of his jacket. The scent of cigarette smoke still clung to the air, mixing with the faint leather of his coat. For the first time in her young life, she felt something that almost resembled safety, but it was fragile, like glass that could shatter at the slightest sound. Her mother stood in the doorway, arms folded tightly, her lips twisted into a sneer. "There. You wanted her? Now you've got her. Let's see how long your generosity lasts." The child welfare officers exchanged glances, their pens poised above their forms. One of them, a woman with kind but cautious eyes, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're here to assess the situation. You cannot just give up your child like—" "Like what?" the mother snapped. "Like I don't want her? Like I can't handle another mouth to feed? He says he can do better. Let him. You all think you're saints until the bills come, until the hunger comes. Then you'll throw her back at me like scraps." The words hit Clara like stones. She clung tighter to the stranger, her sobs muffled against his chest. The man's jaw tightened, his hand gently patting her back as though steadying not just her, but himself. He turned his gaze to the mother, his voice calm yet firm. "You speak of hunger, of struggle. Those are real. I know them. But cruelty doesn't fill an empty stomach, and scars don't pay rent." The mother's face hardened, but her eyes flickered. For a brief moment the mask slipped, revealing exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She looked older than her years, worn down by bitterness and regret. The welfare officer cleared her throat. "We need to know the circumstances of this child's home. There are procedures." But the man cut in, his voice steady, deliberate. "I will take responsibility. I will cover her expenses, her schooling, her care. I will provide what she needs without condition, but only if she is treated with dignity, if she is loved." The neighbors gasped. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others murmured prayers under their breath. No one had ever seen someone step forward so boldly, offering not just money, but protection. Clara's mother let out a bitter laugh, the sound scraping like broken glass. "Love? What do you know of love? You think buying a child's comfort is love? You think feeding her with silver spoons will erase the fact that she is mine?" The man didn't look away. "Then show it. Show her love now, while she still looks to you for it." The yard grew tense, the silence so sharp it could be cut. Clara peeked up from his chest, her small eyes searching her mother's face. For just a moment she thought she saw softness there, a flicker of something human, but it vanished in an instant. The mother's lip curled, her voice sharp. "If you want her so much, then take her. But know this, she'll never be yours. She'll always be mine, in blood and memory. You can buy her clothes, feed her fancy food, but when she looks in the mirror, she'll see me. When she cries at night, she'll cry for me." The officers shifted uncomfortably, one of them scribbling notes quickly. Clara's small voice trembled, breaking the silence. "Mama, please, I'll be good. I'll work harder. Don't send me away." The mother's eyes narrowed. "Harder? What do you think you are, my servant?" Her hand twitched, as though itching to strike again. The man's voice cut through the rising storm. "No, she is a child, and I will not let her beg for scraps of kindness any longer." Clara clutched his sleeve tighter, her small knuckles white with fear. She turned her face upward, her voice barely a whisper. Can I go with you?" The yard erupted in murmurs, neighbors leaning out further, some with tears in their eyes. The officers froze, stunned by the rawness of the child's plea. The mother's face twisted, rage and humiliation boiling over. She marched forward, her hand raised high. "How dare you? How dare you say that in front of me?" Clara squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the blow, but it never landed. The man stepped between them, his arm outstretched, his voice cutting like thunder. "Enough." His eyes blazed, his tone carrying a weight that silenced every whisper in the street. "You will not strike her again." The mother's hand trembled in the air, frozen in place, her breathing ragged. For the first time, uncertainty cracked through her fury. The child welfare officer stepped forward quickly, her voice firm. "That's enough, ma'am. If you lay another hand on her, we'll remove her immediately. Do you understand?" The mother's chest heaved, her glare darting between the officers and the man, before finally settling on Clara. And in that moment, in front of everyone, she spat the words that would haunt her daughter forever. You are no daughter of mine." The words cut through Clara like a blade. "You are no daughter of mine." They rang in her ears, heavy and merciless, as though the whole world had just confirmed her worst fear, that she didn't belong anywhere. Her small body swayed, her hands clutching the stranger's sleeve as if it were the only thing tethering her to the earth. The crowd outside the fence murmured in shock. A few gasped, others shook their heads, and some whispered, "Did she really say that?" But no one moved to comfort the girl. Their silence pressed in like a second cruelty. The man, his hand still resting protectively on Clara's shoulder, lowered his gaze to her, his tone softening against the edge of anger in his voice. "Clara," he said, speaking her name with deliberate care, "look at me." Her wet lashes lifted slowly. Her eyes, red from crying, met his steady gaze. "You are worth more than what she just said. Do you believe me?" Clara bit her lip. Her mouth opened, but the words faltered. She had been told so many times that she was worthless, clumsy, unwanted, that to believe anything else felt like a dangerous dream. The welfare officer stepped forward gently, kneeling so she was eye level with the girl. "Sweetheart, you don't have to answer right now," she said kindly, "but soon you'll have a choice. A real choice." The mother scoffed, her arms folded tight across her chest. "Choice? She's a child. She doesn't know what she wants. She'll forget this tantrum tomorrow." The man's voice hardened, cutting across hers. "Children know more than we give them credit for. They know when they're safe and when they're not." Clara shivered. The officer extended her hand, but Clara didn't take it. Instead, she clung to the man's sleeve even tighter. Her small voice cracked as she whispered, "If I stay, she'll hurt me again." The mother's eyes widened, rage spilling across her features. "You ungrateful little—" She lunged forward, hand raised high, but before she could strike, the man stepped fully between them, his stance a shield. His voice boomed, louder than any shout she had ever heard in that yard. "Touch her again, and I swear you'll regret it." The yard went still. The neighbors froze, mouths open, some nodding in approval, others watching with fearful fascination. Clara's mother faltered, her hand suspended midair, then slowly lowered it, her chest heaving. The officer stood straighter now, her tone crisp. "That's enough. We can't allow this to continue. The child's well-being is in immediate danger. Until further investigation, she's coming with us." The mother's laugh was sharp, bitter, dripping with venom. Take her and see if I care, but don't come crawling back when she's too much to handle. She's nothing but trouble, just like her father." Clara flinched at the mention of her father, her little heart pounding. She tugged gently at the man's sleeve, her voice trembling. Can I go with him instead? Not with them. Please." The officers exchanged glances, hesitating. Their rules were strict, their procedures rigid. But the plea in light beats. Clara's voice was unlike anything they'd heard. The man crouched again, meeting her gaze head on. "Clara," he said softly, "if you want to come with me, you'll need to be brave. Do you think you can do that?" Her lip trembled, but she nodded. "I can try." He extended his hand, open and steady. For a long, breathless moment, Clara stared at it, her small fingers hovering uncertainly. Behind her, her mother muttered curses under her breath, pacing like a caged animal. The officers looked on, unsure if they should intervene. And then, with a trembling breath, Clara slid her tiny hand into his. The yard erupted in whispers, some neighbors gasping aloud. It was a gesture so small, yet it carried the weight of defiance, of courage, of a child's desperate leap toward hope. The man closed his fingers gently around hers, sealing the choice she had just made. His voice was firm now, unshakable. "She's coming with me." The mother's face twisted, fury spilling into every feature. She stormed forward, screaming loud enough for the whole block to hear, "Over my dead body!" Clara clung tighter to the man's hand, burying her face against his arm. Her little body shook, but she did not let go. The officers stepped between them, their voices raised, trying to calm the storm. But it was too late. The battle line had been drawn. The scream rang like a warning siren through the crowded street. Neighbors pressed closer to their windows, some clutching their children to their chests, others whispering prayers under their breath. Clara's mother surged forward, her hand poised to strike, not at her daughter this time, but at the man who shielded her. The stranger did not flinch. He caught her wrist mid-air, his grip firm but not cruel. His voice thundered with restrained fury, echoing against the thin walls of the houses nearby. "Enough! This ends here." Clara's mother struggled, twisting against his hold. Her face was flushed, her teeth clenched in rage. "You think you can waltz in here with your fine suit and expensive car and take everything from me? She's mine. Do you hear me? Mine!" Clara pressed herself tighter against the man's side, trembling. Her tiny fingers clutched at his sleeve as though it were the only thing keeping her from drowning. The welfare officers rushed forward, separating them. One officer spoke sharply, his voice edged with authority. "Ma'am, step back. This behavior will be added to our report." But the mother only laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Report me? Go ahead. What do I care? You'll all leave, and I'll still be here, raising her the way I see fit. No one can take her from me." The crowd murmured uneasily. The neighbors had long grown used to her temper, but now, faced with the man's defiance and the officer's presence, they saw a woman cornered, desperate, clawing to keep control. The stranger released her wrist slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. His voice dropped, lower, dangerous in its calm. "If you truly love her, then prove it. Show her compassion. Show her that she is wanted." The mother's lip curled, her eyes darting from him to her daughter. For a moment the world seemed to still. Clara looked up, hopeful, just for a heartbeat, longing for a scrap of gentleness, but it never came. Her mother spat on the ground, her voice sharp as glass. "Love? Don't talk to me about love. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't keep the lights on. And this one," she jabbed a finger at Clara, her words dripping with venom, "this one has done nothing but ruin me." Clara's eyes welled, her small frame trembling. She turned her face into the stranger's coat, as if hiding from the words themselves. The man's expression hardened, a storm gathering behind his steady gaze. He turned to the officers, his voice resolute. "You've seen enough. She's not safe here." The female officer nodded grimly. "We'll need to remove the child immediately for her safety." The mother's shriek pierced the air. "No, you can't take her. You can't just steal my child like some thief." The male officer stepped forward, his tone stern. "Ma'am, your actions today leave us no choice. If you interfere further, you'll face charges." The mother's knees buckled slightly, her bravado faltering for the first time. She staggered back toward the doorway, her breath coming fast, her eyes darting wildly. She looked less like a monster and more like a trapped animal, cornered and lashing out. Clara, still clinging to the man, whispered faintly, "She'll come for me. She always comes for me." Her words sank into him, heavier than stone. He lowered his hand, resting it gently on her head. His tone softened, almost like a vow. "Not anymore, Clara. Not while I'm here." The officers moved closer, one producing a clipboard, the other dialing on a phone. Neighbors whispered louder, their voices weaving into a chorus of disbelief. Some murmured that perhaps the man was going too far. Others whispered that at last, someone was doing what they had never had the courage to. The mother's eyes blazed as she pointed at the stranger, her voice hoarse from shouting, "You'll regret this. I don't care who you are or what you have. No one steals from me and walks away." The man stood tall, his presence filling the yard, his shadow stretching long across the cracked tiles. He met her glare with steady defiance. "I am not stealing her," he said firmly. "I am saving her." The officers stepped between them, one gently urging Clara and the man toward the gate. The mother remained rooted in place, her fists clenched, her face twisted in fury and fear. And then, in a chilling voice that silenced the crowd, she hissed after them, "You may take her today, but she will always be mine, and one way or another, I will get her back." The black car purred to life as the stranger opened the rear door, motioning for Clara to climb inside. She hesitated, her wide eyes darting nervously back toward the house. Her mother still stood in the doorway, arms folded, her glare burning holes through the air. Clara's small hand trembled as it gripped the man's sleeve. "She'll come for me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She always does." The man crouched beside her, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Not while I'm here," he said firmly. "You're safe now." Her bottom lip quivered, but something in his tone, unshakable, resolute, gave her just enough courage to climb into the car. She pressed herself against the seat, knees drawn to her chest as though bracing against a world too big and too cruel. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing her away from the mother's voice that still shouted curses as the car pulled from the curb. The neighbors lingered at their windows long after the taillights disappeared, whispering to each other of what they had just seen. The mansion rose like a fortress at the edge of the city, its gates tall and ornate, its gardens stretching wide with trimmed hedges and carefully placed fountains. To Clara, it looked like something out of a dream, or perhaps a storybook she wasn't sure she was allowed to believe in. The car stopped, and the stranger stepped out, offering his hand once more. Clara hesitated before slipping her small fingers into his. Her body shook as she followed him up the wide stone steps, the sound of her footsteps echoing faintly against the marble. Inside, the house glowed with warm light. A long hallway stretched ahead, lined with framed paintings and photographs. The scent of polished wood and faint cologne replaced the smoke and stale air of her old home. Clara stood frozen, overwhelmed. The man crouched again, lowering his voice. "This is your home now, at least until we decide what's best for you. No one will hurt you here. Do you believe me?" Clara's eyes roamed the walls, the gleaming floor, the chandelier that sparkled above. It was too much, too beautiful, too clean. It made her feel small, unworthy. She shook her head faintly, whispering, "It's too nice. I don't belong." The man's expression softened. "You belong wherever you are safe, Clara. And here, you are safe." Later that evening, after a meal that Clara barely touched, he guided her to a guest room. The bed was large, dressed with soft quilts. A small lamp glowed on the nightstand, casting a golden light. Clara sat on the edge, her fingers twisting in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. The man pulled a chair close and sat quietly, giving her space. Finally, in a voice that trembled like glass, she whispered, "Do you really think I'm not bad?" His heart tightened. "Why would you think that?" She lifted her sleeve slowly, revealing faint purple marks along her thin arm. "Mama says I ruin everything, that I make people leave." The sight of those bruises made his jaw clench. He took a steady breath before answering. "Listen to me, Clara. You are not bad. You are not the reason people leave. You are a child, and you deserve to be loved. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Her eyes brimmed with tears as she whispered, "But she said Daddy left because of me." He leaned forward, his voice deep, steady, carrying the weight of truth. "Your father left because of his choices, not yours, never yours." For the first time, Clara let the tears fall freely. She sobbed into her small hands, her shoulders shaking violently as years of silence cracked open. The man sat with her, his hand resting gently on her back, steadying her storm. When her cries finally softened into hiccups, she glanced up timidly. "You sound like, you know." His eyes darkened, a flicker of something buried surfacing for a moment. "I do know," he said quietly. "More than you think." Clara tilted her head, curious, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he reached for the quilt, tucking it around her small frame. "Rest now. Tomorrow will be better." She clutched the quilt, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but before sleep claimed her, she whispered one final, fragile truth. "She'll come for me. She always does." The night was quiet in the mansion, but across town, in that broken little house with its peeling paint and crooked fence, there was no rest. Clara's mother paced the kitchen, cigarette smoke swirling thick in the air. Her hands shook as she slammed the empty pack down onto the counter. Her reflection in the cracked window looked back at her, wild-eyed, desperate. "How dare he?" she muttered, her voice low, trembling with rage. "How dare he walk in here and take her from me like I'm nothing?" She poured herself a drink from a cheap bottle, the liquid sloshing over the rim. Each swallow burned her throat, but it did nothing to dull the fire in her chest. She wasn't angry only at the stranger. She was angry at the neighbors, at the officers, at the whispers that now surely circled the block. They all saw. They all judged. But underneath the anger was something deeper, something she didn't dare admit to herself. Fear. Because for the first time, someone had challenged her hold over Clara. She slammed the glass down hard, splintering it at the edge. Her voice rose in a broken shout. "She's mine. She's all I have left." Her hands trembled as she pulled a phone from the counter, scrolling through numbers. At last, she found one and pressed call. A gruff male voice answered, groggy. "What is it now?" "It's me," she hissed. "He took her, that rich bastard with his fancy car. He stole her from me." The man on the other end sighed heavily. What do you expect me to do about it? You know the courts won't side with you after today. They'll dig up everything. Her voice sharpened, dripping with venom. Then we'll make them believe. I'll tell them he forced her, that he bribed those officers. He doesn't know who he's messing with. The voice was quiet for a moment. Then, coldly, be careful. Men like that don't fall easily. And you, a dry chuckle. You don't exactly have a clean record. She slammed the phone shut, her jaw clenched. At the mansion, the morning sun filtered through tall windows. Clara sat at the long dining table, a plate of eggs and toast before her. She picked at the food timidly, unused to meals prepared with care. The man, Mr. Hale, as she'd come to learn, watched quietly from across the table. You don't have to eat if you're not hungry, he said gently. Clara shrugged. I'm not used to all this. She gestured at the table, the chandelier, the shining cutlery. Mama says people like us don't belong in places like this. Mr. Hale leaned forward, his expression serious. Clara, you belong anywhere you are safe and cared for. Never forget that. Her eyes lifted, searching his face, as though trying to decide if she could trust his words. But even as they sat in that warm, quiet house, the storm outside was gathering. By afternoon, whispers had already reached the mansion. The mother's voice spread through the neighborhood, twisting the truth into poison. He kidnapped her, she wailed to anyone who would listen. Dragged her from my arms. He bribed those officers. Do you think a man like that really cares about my daughter? He just wants her for himself. The story grew, each telling more dramatic than the last. By evening, Clara's mother was at the local station, filing a complaint with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. She painted herself as a victim of circumstance, a struggling mother whose child had been stolen by a manipulative millionaire. And though the officers at the desk exchanged skeptical looks, they could not ignore the weight of her accusation. Paperwork was filed, and a summons was drafted. That night, Clara awoke from a nightmare, her small voice breaking the silence. She was here, she sobbed, clutching her blanket. I heard her. She's coming. Mr. Hale rushed into her room, kneeling at her bedside. He soothed her gently, brushing the damp hair from her face. It was a dream, Clara. Just a dream. But as he held her trembling form, he knew dreams could sometimes be warnings. The phone rang downstairs. He left her only for a moment, but when he lifted the receiver, his face hardened at the words he heard. This is Child Welfare Services. Mr. Hale, we've received a complaint. There will be an investigation into the circumstances of Clara's placement with you. You'll need to appear in court. Mr. Hale's hand tightened on the receiver. His eyes lifted toward the staircase where Clara stood in her nightdress, clutching the railing, her eyes wide with fear. The courthouse loomed tall and gray, its stone pillars casting long shadows across the steps. To Clara, it felt less like a building and more like a giant mouth waiting to swallow her whole. She clutched Mr. Hale's hand tightly as they climbed, her small legs trembling with every step. The echoes of her mother's accusations had followed her here, whispered in every corner of town. Inside, the air was heavy with tension, rows of benches filled with curious faces, neighbors, officials, even strangers drawn by the scandal of it all. The hum of low voices rose and fell, like the murmur of an ocean before a storm. At the front, the judge sat stern and unyielding, his gavel resting before him like a silent warning. Clara's mother was already there, dressed in clothes she had borrowed to look respectable. Her hair was pinned neatly, her face powdered just enough to soften the harshness of her features, but her eyes, wild, restless, betrayed her fury. She cast a glare at Mr. Hale and the child by his side, her lips curling into a tight smile that was anything but kind. When the proceedings began, the mother's voice rang through the room, practiced and pleading. Your Honor, I am a single mother. I've worked myself half to death to provide for my child. But this man, this stranger, came into my home and manipulated everyone. He turned the neighbors against me, bribed officials, and took my daughter away. I am her mother. I gave her life. Doesn't that mean something? Gasps rippled through the courtroom. She knew how to play her part, knew the power of painting herself as a victim. For a moment, Clara lowered her head, ashamed, afraid that the judge might believe her. Mr. Hale's attorney stood to respond, his voice clear and strong. Your Honor, we have evidence and we have witnesses. This is not about poverty or circumstance. This is about cruelty. We will show the bruises on the child, the testimony of neighbors, and the official report from child welfare. This is not a matter of money or manipulation. It is a matter of safety. The judge nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Proceed. One by one, neighbors were called to the stand. Some shuffled nervously, their voices low, admitting they had heard the screaming, seen the pulling of hair, but had convinced themselves it was not their place to interfere. Others spoke more firmly, confessing that they had long feared for Clara but lacked the courage to act. Clara's mother objected at every turn, her voice rising, accusing them of lies, of jealousy, of conspiring with the rich man who stood at her side. The judge silenced her with a sharp rap of the gavel. Then it was Clara's turn. The bailiff guided her to the witness chair, her small frame swallowed by its size. The courtroom hushed, every eye upon her. Her voice quivered barely above a whisper. "Clara," the attorney said gently, "can you tell us what happened the day he came to your house?" Clara looked at her mother, who stared back with eyes sharp as knives. For a moment, fear paralyzed her. Then she turned her gaze to Mr. Hale, who nodded, steady and reassuring. Taking a shaky breath, Clara spoke. "I dropped Mama's cup. It broke. She dragged me by my hair. She said I was useless. She said I made people leave." Gasps filled the room again. Clara's small hands twisted in her lap, her words tumbling out now, raw and unpolished. "She says I ruined her life, that Daddy left because of me. Sometimes she hits me. Sometimes she says I'm not her daughter at all." Tears welled in her eyes, but she lifted her chin just enough to finish. "But when Mr. Hale came, he told me it wasn't my fault. No one ever said that before." The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words settling heavy on every heart. Even the judge leaned forward, his stern expression softening ever so slightly. Her mother erupted, unable to contain herself. "Lies! She's lying! He fed her those words. He put them in her head." The gavel cracked against the wood. "Enough, ma'am," the judge barked. "One more outburst and you will be removed from this court." Clara's mother fell silent, but her glare burned hotter than fire. The attorney turned back to Clara. "Clara, do you feel safe with your mother?" The little girl's lips trembled. She hesitated, then whispered, "No." "And do you feel safe with Mr. Hale?" Clara's eyes found his, her voice small but steady. "Yes," the attorney nodded. "No further questions." As Clara was escorted back to her seat, she clung once again to Mr. Hale's hand, her face pale but her shoulders lighter, as though some hidden burden had finally been spoken aloud. The mother, red-faced, scrambled to salvage what remained. Her attorney pushed forward, arguing that poverty should not be mistaken for abuse, that discipline was a mother's right, that taking Clara away would destroy the very fabric of family itself. But the evidence was clear, the testimonies undeniable. As the arguments drew to a close, the courtroom braced for the judge's words. He shuffled the papers before him, his expression grave. "This is not a decision I take lightly," he began. "The bond between mother and child is sacred, but it is also the duty of this court to protect the vulnerable when that bond has been poisoned by cruelty." Every breath in the room seemed to hold still. Clara squeezed Mr. Hale's hand, her eyes wide, her chest rising and falling in sharp little gasps. The judge lifted his gaze, preparing to deliver his ruling. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Heads turned, whispers spread like wildfire, and Clara's mother's face lit with a strange, twisted triumph. The man who had just entered strode confidently toward the front, his boots echoing sharply on the polished floor. He was tall, though weathered, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes sharp but tired. His presence carried weight, not because of wealth or power, but because of the sudden disruption he represented. He stopped in the center, his chest rising and falling heavily, as though each step had been a battle. Clara's small hand slipped from Mr. Hale's, trembling as she clutched the edge of her chair. Her lips parted, her voice barely audible. "Daddy?" The word cracked in the still air, fragile and disbelieving. The man's eyes softened for a moment as they landed on her, but almost instantly hardened again when they shifted to Mr. Hale. "She is my daughter, my blood, and I will not let a stranger take her away from me." The judge banged his gavel sharply. "Order! Order in the court!" The murmurs stilled, though the air remained thick with tension. The judge's eyes narrowed. "And who exactly are you?" The man straightened his shoulders. I am Samuel Green, Clara's father. I abandoned her once, but I am here to claim my rights now. She belongs with me. Gasps rose again, and all eyes turned to Clara. Her little body was rigid, her hands trembling. The mention of his name dredged up fragments of memory, a shadow at the door, a voice raised in anger, the day he walked out and never returned. Her mother seized the opportunity, her voice suddenly sweet, dripping with false sorrow. Your Honor, this is the child's father. He left us years ago, yes, but he is her flesh and blood. Doesn't she deserve to be with at least one of her real parents? Her words sliced through the room, turning glances of pity toward the man beside her into suspicion. Wasn't it strange, after all, for a stranger to care so much? Mr. Hale remained silent, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on Samuel. His hands, however, curled into fists at his sides. The attorney for Hale rose. Your Honor, this man abandoned his family years ago. He has no standing here today without proof of custody nor any evidence of capability to care for this child. But Samuel's voice thundered over him. I can provide for her. I've turned my life around. I have work. I have a home. I came back because I could not bear to see her taken by someone else. I made mistakes, but she is mine. The judge leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. Mr. Green, you may present evidence of your claim. But understand this. Abandonment weighs heavily in this court. Samuel's eyes flickered, just for a second, betraying unease. Then he lifted his chin stubbornly. I left because I couldn't take the screaming, the fighting. I thought they'd be better off without me. But I was wrong. I should have stayed. And I won't leave again. Clara's mother wiped at fake tears with the back of her hand. See? Even he admits it. He's her father. Let them be reunited. Isn't that better than letting a stranger raise her? Clara's small voice broke the tension. She stood shakily, her knees knocking against the wooden bench. Daddy, she whispered, why didn't you come back sooner? The question pierced the air. Samuel's face twisted, his mouth opening, then closing. He had no answer that could undo years of absence. Clara's eyes brimmed with tears as she clutched the fabric of her dress. Do you know how many nights I cried for you? Do you know how many times Mama said you left because of me? Her voice cracked, raw with pain, too old for her small frame. The courtroom held its breath. Samuel faltered, his hand reaching toward her, but she flinched, stepping back. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought leaving was better. But I see now I was wrong. Please, Clara, let me make it right. Mr. Hale rose, his voice cutting through the silence. You don't make it right by showing up when the battle is nearly over. You don't erase years of pain with words. Children don't need excuses. They need protection. They need presence. Samuel's eyes narrowed. And what are you? You're no kin of hers. You think money makes you a father. You think a mansion replaces blood. Mr. Hale's expression darkened, though his voice remained calm. No, I think love does. I think safety does. And I'll give her both, whether I have her blood or not. The gavel slammed again. Enough. This court will decide based on evidence in the child's best interests, not speeches. The judge turned his gaze toward Clara, his voice gentler now. Clara, do you want to stay with your father or with Mr. Hale? The room froze. Every eye was on her. Her mother leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Her father stretched his hand toward her, pleading. Mr. Hale stood steady, silent, not pressing her, only waiting. Clara's small hands twisted nervously. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her breath shallow. And then she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. I want to stay, where I feel safe. The mother's scream echoed through the courtroom, shrill and furious. Gasps filled the air, and the judge's gavel slammed down with a sharp crack. Order, he barked, his voice booming. One more outburst, and you will be removed from this courtroom. But the silence that followed wasn't calm. It was heavy, suffocating. Clara stood frozen, her small chest rising and falling rapidly. Her father's hand was still stretched toward her, trembling now, his face etched with a desperate plea. Her mother seethed in her seat, her eyes burning with wildfire. And then there was Mr. Hale, steady as stone, his gaze fixed not on the parents but on Clara, his entire presence saying without words, I will not fail you. The judge leaned forward, folding his hands. The child has spoken. She wishes to remain where she feels safe. This court must weigh that heavily. But before Clara could finish the words trembling on her lips, Samuel cut in, his voice raw with desperation. You don't understand, Your Honor. He's not what he seems. Men like him don't do anything for free. Why would he care about my daughter? Why would a millionaire take in a stranger's child unless he wanted something in return? The words planted doubt like poison vines in the room. Murmurs spread, and Clara's mother smirked, seizing the opportunity. See? Even her father knows. He's hiding something. That's why he came out of nowhere pretending to care. Tell us, Mr. Hale, why her? Why my daughter? For the first time, Mr. Hale's calm cracked. His shoulders tensed, his jaw tightened. His eyes lowered, then lifted again, heavy with something unspoken. The room leaned in as the judge's voice pressed, quiet but firm. Well, Mr. Hale? Why, indeed. Mr. Hale rose slowly, his tall frame commanding the room. He looked not at the judge, nor at the lawyers, nor even at Samuel, but directly at Clara. His voice was low at first, rough, as if each word had to climb past old scars. Because once, I was her. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Mr. Hale's eyes darkened, his hand resting lightly against the edge of the table as though steadying himself against memories too heavy to bear. When I was her age, I was beaten, dragged by my hair just like Clara, told I was worthless, told I was the reason my parents' lives fell apart. I learned to hide in corners, to stay quiet, to believe I was a burden. Clara's breath caught, her little hands trembling as she leaned forward, listening as if the air itself carried a secret meant only for her. My father left when I was 7, Hale continued, his voice thick with memory. My mother, she took her pain out on me, every day, every night, until one evening a man I didn't know stepped between us. He said the same words I said to Clara. Enough. He wasn't rich, he wasn't powerful, but he saved me. He gave me shelter. He showed me I wasn't the monster I was told I was. The court was utterly silent now, hanging on his every word. And when I grew older, he went on, I swore that if I ever saw those same tears in another child's eyes, I would not stand by. Not ever. I don't do this for pity. I don't do this for pride. I do this because I owe a debt to the child I once was and to the man who saved me when no one else would. Clara's eyes glistened with tears as she whispered, That's why you came for me. He nodded, his voice softer now, carrying a weight that wrapped around her like a shield. Yes, Clara, that's why. You are not worthless. You are not the reason they left. You are a child, and you deserve more than pain. A sob broke from somewhere in the gallery. Even the judge's face softened, his stern lines bending under the weight of the truth. Samuel's shoulders sagged, his fight faltering. He looked at Clara, shame flickering across his face, as he realized the depth of the hole his absence had left. The mother, though, bristled, her voice a sharp hiss. You think your sob story makes you better than me? You think one speech will erase the fact that she's mine? But Clara, trembling, finally spoke up, not to her mother, not to her father, but to the judge. Her small voice carried the weight of years. I want to stay with him, with Mr. Hale, because with him, I feel safe. The words shattered the last of the courtroom's tension. The mother lunged forward as if to protest again, but the officers held her back firmly. Samuel bowed his head, his hands covering his face. The judge's gavel struck once, the sound final, echoing through the chamber. This court will recess for deliberation. When I return, I will render my judgment. The room erupted into murmurs as the judge stood and exited. Clara clung to Mr. Hale's hand, her little body trembling but her eyes shining with something new. Hope. The gavel struck 3 times as the judge returned, the sound carrying like thunder through the courtroom. Everyone scrambled back to their seats, the tension so sharp it could slice the air. Clara sat rigidly beside Mr. Hale, her tiny hands folded in her lap. Samuel sat across from her, hollow-eyed, shoulders sagging as though the years of his absence finally pressed down with their full weight. Her mother glared, her face twisted with fury, restrained by the bailiff's watchful eye. The judge's expression was grave. This is not a simple case. It involves not only poverty and circumstance, but neglect, cruelty, abandonment, and redemption. And yet, the law is clear. The safety and well-being of the child must always come first. The courtroom fell silent. Clara's breath hitched. Mr. Hale rested a steady hand on her shoulder, his touch anchoring her against the storm. The judge's gaze swept the room. The mother's actions demonstrate repeated patterns of cruelty, verbal and physical abuse, and a failure to provide a safe home. The father, though blood, abandoned his duty for years and has only now returned, too late to provide the stability this child deserves. Samuel closed his eyes, his jaw tight, as if bracing for a blow he already knew was coming. Clara's mother opened her mouth to protest, but the judge silenced her with a sharp glare. The gavel struck once. Custody of Clara Green is hereby granted to Mr. Hale, with oversight by Child Welfare Services for the next 12 months. This court recognizes his capacity to provide for her needs, and more importantly, his proven commitment to her safety and emotional well-being. Gasps filled the courtroom. Some sighed in relief, others in shock. Clara's mother let out a strangled cry, lunging forward before the bailiff restrained her. Her voice rose, wild and broken. "She's mine! You can't take her from me! She's mine!" The judge's voice cut through like a blade. "Remove her from this court!" The bailiffs dragged her struggling form out of the chamber, her shrieks echoing in the hall until they were swallowed by distance. Samuel sat with his head in his hands, silent tears slipping between his fingers. He looked up once, his gaze meeting Clara's, but her eyes turned away. He had no claim left, not in law, not in heart. Clara sat frozen, unable to comprehend the weight of what had just been decided. The judge rose, offering her one final glance softened with humanity. "Clara, you are safe now, and may you grow knowing your worth." The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving only Mr. Hale and Clara in the quiet chamber. He knelt beside her, his eyes level with hers. "It's over," he said softly. "You're coming home with me." Clara blinked at him, her lips trembling. "Home?" He nodded, a faint smile breaking the tension of his face. "Yes, home." That evening, the mansion's lights glowed warmly as the car pulled into the drive. Clara stepped out cautiously, her small figure silhouetted against the tall gates. This time, she did not shrink back. This time, she stepped forward willingly, her hand nestled in his. Inside, the air smelled of bread and herbs, the housekeeper having prepared a meal. Clara sat at the table, her eyes wide as plates were set before her. She picked at the food at first, then ate slowly, steadily, until she realized no one was going to snatch it away, no one was going to scream at her for crumbs on the floor. Later, she wandered into the library. Her fingers traced the spines of books, her eyes wide at the shelves that seemed endless. Mr. Hale watched from the doorway, his expression soft. "These are all yours to read whenever you want," he said. Clara turned, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Even me?" He stepped into the room, kneeling again so his voice was close to hers. "Especially you." Her lips parted, and for the first time, a shy smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. But healing was not instant. That night, Clara woke from another nightmare, her voice piercing the halls. She's coming for me." Mr. Hale rushed in, gathering her into his arms. "No, Clara, she's gone. She can't hurt you now. Not here." Her sobs slowed only after long minutes, her head pressed against his chest, her small fists clutching his shirt. "Promise?" she whispered. He looked down at her, his eyes burning with the weight of his vow. "I promise, as long as I live, no one will ever lay a hand on you again." And for the first time, Clara let herself believe it. She closed her eyes, drifting into a dreamless sleep. Weeks turned into months. Clara began to laugh, a sound so light, so fragile, it startled the staff the first time they heard it. She ran through the gardens, her feet carrying her across the grass, her hair catching the sunlight. She drew pictures, filled pages with colors, stories of castles and heroes. Slowly, the shadows in her eyes began to fade. Mr. Hale watched from the veranda, a quiet pride warming his chest. He saw not just a child healing, but a child blossoming, reclaiming the life she had almost been denied. And though Clara's scars would never vanish completely, she was no longer defined by them. She was no longer the girl dragged by her hair for a broken cup. She was Clara, safe, loved, and free.